Hey, it's me, Gary Moore, and I am so honored, no, actually stoked beyond my own comprehension to have this lady next to me. This is Michelle Kath Sinclair.
Hello, thanks
and welcome
for
to
having
KLOS.
me.
You're
so exciting.
Filmmaker, and her dad was part of a band that I could not have lived my childhood or adulthood without. A guy by the name of Terry Kath, and she has made a film about her dad.
Yes,
The
I
Terry
have.
Kath Experience.
The Terry Kath Experience.
And it's just out now. Or it's going to be out.
December 12th.
December the 12th. So whenever you're watching this.
The long-awaited.
And we're doing a thing over at the Laemmle Ahrya on Wilshire.
Yes.
Next Tuesday.
Yes.
The big premiere of it, a Q&A session, and I'm so excited about it. How did this film come about? Were you a filmmaker before?
I was not a filmmaker, so this was my college experience making. It was like going to college
Right.
to make a film.
Learn as you go.
But I think that's the great aftermath of it. But really, it's just about getting to know my dad, figuring out who he was as a musician, as a person, since I was only 2 years old when he passed away. So
It was kind of a journey into finding out.
it was a journey into finding him, but exposing him a little bit for the talents, as many of his peers say, the unsung great guitar hero over time that didn't get his dues.
This was a guitarist, in case you haven't heard this quote, who Jimi Hendrix said was a better guitarist than he was at the time. Which is, how cool is that to hear? Your dad, according to Jimi Hendrix, was a better guitarist than Jimi Hendrix.
I mean, do we need to even make a film after that? I don't know.
That's the through line right there. But, you know, it's interesting because Chicago was one of those bands where, and I got exposed to them really early. I was lucky. I grew up next to a college where a lot of music guys were, and I hung out with these music majors. And they told me, like, look, I know you like the hits, but check out what these guys, these are all stars. Every one of these guys is an all-star. They may not be like a face in the band that's always up there, but they were all stars. And it's like a football team. You know, there's like a team sport. And your dad was pretty much the quarterback, I think, of the team.
I like it. Yeah, if you look through it, each one of them has their song or their moment.
Yeah.
And in showing this film to one of my friends who's a director, he's like, that's a Chicago song? I never heard that song. I was like, well, yeah, I'm trying to like put my dad's music in there. And then texted me later like, oh, now I'm like digging in the crates because I wanted to go hear these other songs I never really knew were Chicago, quote unquote, you know.
If I had $1 for every time that I've listened to Chicago's version with your dad's great guitar work on I'm a Man, what, Poem 58, well, Question 67, 68's got some great moments in it, but South California Purples, which has got the greatest opening riffs I absolutely love those riffs. Dialogue, and you remember he had to play both rhythm and lead, so it's like one of those, like Jimmy and, you know, Eddie Van Halen does the same thing, and Pete Townsend. When you're the only guitarist, you got all those chores. If I had $1 for every time I listen to all those, and Biblos, which is another one of my favorites off the 7th album, I could have funded your film for you. That's how often I listen to these.
I love it. I wish that was the case.
I know. Now, when did you start working on this?
So officially, it would have been back in 2011 when we did our first Kickstarter campaign to start raising funds. But the concept and idea was like way before that. Me trying to figure out how the heck I was going to actually make a film, you know, never having done it before. And I don't understand how people make films. I mean, I don't understand how they raise millions of dollars. I mean, we were trying to raise measly sums just to like, get the story out there. So over 7-8 years in the making, for sure.
So there's a lot of interviews, probably a lot of traveling that you had to do.
Traveling, yeah. And plus everyone, the whole team that worked on it, were doing it almost for the love of the project. So working around everyone's schedules because everyone had to keep working.
Right.
So we would be like, okay, next year is going to be our Colorado trip. Next year will be Chicago, you know, and we kind of had to space it all out.
Because they recorded obviously a lot at the Caribou Ranch in Colorado, which that's well documented, but they also did some stuff in New York. They did some stuff Chicago. Out here, they had a big L.A. presence, obviously because they moved out here and lived here for, I guess, if they didn't work here, they certainly were living out here for.
Yeah, and I think their L.A. part of their story is really cool because they moved in 1970 and started working and playing at the Whiskey, and that's where they met Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and all these really cool people that like I didn't even realize were a part of their kind of start into music.
They opened for Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
I mean, and Jimmy would, and not only open it, but he came to see them on multiple times, I believe, at the Whiskey too. He had a little private area up there where he could, you know, go and hang out and watch his guitars. I think Terry was one of his, if not his favorite guitarist that he would go and see at the time.
Yeah.
So I can imagine trying to piece together and get this image of what your dad was like. What were the emotions like when you were doing this? The gamut. You must have gone through a gamut of emotions, the things that you were finding out.
I mean, it's hard because, you know, being so young when he passed, it's almost, I think, a different experience than if I was, you know, a teenager or something like that. Mm-hmm. I think it was probably a lot more emotional for the person I'm interviewing. So being aware of, I mean, that was where the real lesson in being a documentary filmmaker comes from, is who am I talking to? How is it going to affect them? Because we have to bring up this like kind of really hard topic eventually of a really great person. So I always say, for me, the big emotion came later when we're editing it together, and I got to take off the director's hat of like microman and producer's hat, and I get to watch the interviews almost for the first time, even though I was there, and take in what everyone's saying, and then go, whoa, you know.
Then it starts to sink in.
Yeah, for sure.
What were some of the surprising things that you found out about your dad? What are some things that surprised you that you found out about your father?
Oh man, he's just really big personality. I mean, everyone talks about, oh, he's such a great guy, and I got to hear these really funny stories. I mean, I got to see a side of him that really painted this picture of like this really grand personality who had a great sense of humor, but also if something didn't bother him, he let you know.
Well, he was like 6'2", I believe, right? He was not a small guy.
Yeah.
And if you ever saw him in concert, you know, he was like the guy, and he was the one who always like, and I think Lee of the band would say that he was the one who always started off the songs.
Yeah.
He was sort of like the band leader, which you had to have with that. Even though you're a bunch of all-stars and you all know what you're doing, you still have to have the one guy who's going to say, let's do this, or like when he was doing a solo, let's wrap it up.
If you look at any of those online videos of them playing, you can see it. You can see it there. Don't just cut to the solo. Like, look at the beginning and the end. Yeah, you can see it. It's hilarious.
And the other cool thing about it, his stage presence was, and I always love this just from an aesthetic standpoint, or sartorial standpoint, was your dad loved wearing hockey jerseys.
Yeah.
He would wear, and the funny thing was sometimes I grew up near St. Louis, so he would like, here's a Chicago guy wearing a Blues jersey. You know, they're blood rivals basically. And then he would also wear a Blackhawks jersey and and a Rangers. I know there's a lot of footage of him in a New York Rangers jersey. I thought that was really very cool.
I think what I learned is that like is a real rebellion to kind of their early days when they were trying to make them all wear suits and ties.
Right.
And then the fashion was to wear these like rhinestone. We actually cut this out of the film because we couldn't really make a good story out of it that was gripping, but like they all talk about how they were wearing all these like rhinestone one-piece outfits, almost very Elvis-esque, and my dad hated them, and it was almost like a rebellion, you know, like I'm just gonna wear a hockey jersey and have a beard.
Speaking of that, here is the great thing about Chicago was, you know, that I loved about the band that your dad had certainly a big part of was, you know, there's one rule in rock and roll, and that's there are no rules. So here's a brand new band that came out, and their first album was a double album. Yeah. Like, wow, that's pretty cocky. And then the second album, oh, you didn't get enough on that? Well, here's another double album of new stuff.
Yep.
And then the third album, oh, you didn't get enough on that? Here's another double album. Then Chicago at Carnegie Hall was 4 albums and a poster the size of a billboard.
Yeah.
And so you always got extra stuff with Chicago. In the 5th album, you got 2 posters, one of which was a large version of this. And I'll turn to this page. I want to show you. Look at that handsome guy.
This is a handsome guy.
In overalls.
Mm-hmm.
And a coonskin cap.
This is a good outfit.
You talk about breaking some fashion barriers, right? That's about as far away from a rhinestone outfit I think as you can get.
Yep.
But you got great guitar. You know, I mean, these were guys that were concerned with musicianship and songwriting. And yeah, you got the hits, you got the Saturday in the Parks, and you got the beginnings, and what, does anybody really know what time it is in 25 or 6 to 4? But if you haven't heard some of the other things, that's really where I think the gold is.
Yeah.
Because of where he would get in and really the band could get into these grooves and these extended things. They could play anything.
I mean, you have 7 really talented guys, each with different backgrounds and something to contribute. Yeah, each album has its definitely worth exploring.
And if you don't know Terry's stuff, this would be a great starter album.
Yeah, I didn't realize there was a vinyl of that. That's so cool.
The vinyl version of the innovative guitar of Terry Kath, which is putting it mildly, in a Rangers jersey, by the way. And there's some great photos and some liner notes on the back, but it's 4 sides of everything from an hour in the shower. You actually tried that when I was a kid, when the third album came. No, I was 30 minutes and I was like a prune. But but there's so many cool, and there's some live stuff. The Mississippi Delta City Blues from, I guess it was the 11th album that they had put out. Your dad did 1 through 11, right? Was there like 11 albums?
Yeah, it's weird because there's like a couple, like there's Carnegie Hall, and then I think there's a couple greatest hits.
Right. They would number those too. They were like,
which is crazy. It's like, I think there's like 11 that he's on, but it was only like a less than a 10-year span.
Yeah. Well, that was the crazy that you had to have, and that was, you know, if you're young and you don't know this, you got an album a year from your favorite bands and your artists, and usually a tour. Yeah, right. Exactly. Chicago 72 tour. So what do you want people to come away with when they see this documentary about your dad?
I mean, I really want people to want more. If they can walk away and be like, I need to know more, or listen to more, or dig deeper into the Chicago catalog or Terry's catalog, then I think I've done my job. Or I need to go Google search that concert and listen to the whole piece. You know, we can't put it all in there for people. But if you're like, I got to remember to go do that later and explore this guy a little bit more and the music, then I feel like I've done my job.
One last thing I want to ask you, what are your personal favorites of Chicago that involve your father?
Oh, you mean song-wise?
You're right, yes.
It's funny because I have different things through different times. I mean, there was a time in my high school days where Memories of Love with the prelude to it was so magical to me because my mom would always explain how he loved to listen to classical music. So when I found that piece, the whole piece, from AM PM to Memories of Love, I was always amazed that, like, it was almost like he got to create, I'm going to create my own little classical masterpiece. So I've always loved that piece. I know it's not very rock and roll. It's very romantic almost in a way, but I always love that. I mean, I could keep going, but
please do.
Just see the movie, I guess. That explains it.
So it'll be out on Tuesday the 12th, and again, that's going to be at Laemmle's Ahrya Theater on Wilshire in Beverly Hills. And then after that, DVD.
So the DVD gets released, Blu-rays, streaming online. There's so many different avenues for people to see the film.
And after that, any more documentaries you want to do?
Oh man, if I get the chance to do it again, I would love to.
Well, I can't wait to see it. I know there's a lot of people who love Chicago. Can't wait to see it as well. So check it out starting December the 12th. Terry Kath's daughter, the lovely Michelle Kath Sinclair.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. Thanks for watching here at 95.5KLOS.com.